Okay, Liz, sorry, a bit of a technical problem at my end, so I'm going to hand straight to you. It's 6 o'clock, and we'll be talking about the Facebook page.
Okay, well, this is Spectrum Voices Conversation. We are a group of autistic people that meet every Sunday night at 6 p.m. UK time, 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the US, and we talk about our experiences. We talk about autism, and we are led by uh, the posts that Harry shares on the Autistic Radio Facebook page. So we take our cues from there and we talk about the posts. The first one we'll go to is from Jordan James, the autistic photographer. This is just a quote on a darkish background. Demand avoidance is just as much about saying no to myself as it is to others. What do we think about that?
Can somebody remind me what demand avoidance is again?
Demand avoidance, in sort of medical terms, pathological demand avoidance, and the community sometimes calls it persistent drive for autonomy, is not, it's not a standalone diagnosis, it's more of a profile that's closely linked to the autism spectrum. So not every autistic person experiences demand avoidance. Some do in every context, and some do in only some contexts. And it is I'm trying to think of the best way to phrase this. Demand avoidance is what happens when somebody asks you to do something or tells you to do something, even if it's something that you want to do, and even if it was your idea, and when somebody else puts that demand on you, you can't do it. You're unable to do it. It's not the same as defiance. It's more pathological than that. It's more deep rooted than that. Hence the name. Does that help?
I. It sounds like a very positive thing. If you avoid people's demands and you request your own autonomy, that that's something that you're complimenting somebody for, isn't it?
Um, that can be a positive trait and a positive experience in some contexts, but perhaps not in others. For example, if you have all agreed to go out, you've all arranged to go out for a meal for someone's birthday, and then someone says, okay, it's time to leave, and you go, well, no, I can't go. And it was your birthday meal. Because somebody else has said, come on, we've got to leave, you're now unable to go to your own birthday meal. That would be a negative experience, I think. Missing out on your own fun because somebody else said you had to do it. That to me seems like not a good thing.
Okay, so is demand avoidance then a kind of reflex that happens without it going through you thinking about what's best for yourself? It just happens to you. Is that what demand avoidance is?
Yeah, as I understand it, I follow a couple of PDA pages on Facebook, and I've learned a lot from them. And that's what I understand it to be.
At some level, it's got to be to do with anxiety, hasn't it? It's the being out of control situation.
I mean, it may be that Jordan's not talking about pathological demand avoidance. He's not talking about PDA. He's talking about avoiding the demands of others when people are putting too much on you. I'm not, because I can't really be sure from the post what angle he's coming at it from, if that makes sense. So I'm not, yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I'm lost a bit. It's kind of like something internally is causing him an issue. He's saying something from inside, or they, I don't know what the gender is. Um, it's an internal problem as much as it is. So saying no to yourself is as difficult as it, or is it, immediate, or. 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 Is it, immediate, or maybe it's just trying to express that being somebody who exhibits demand avoidance is tough on them as well as it is for everyone around them. Maybe that it's kind of like owning the problem a bit.
Yeah, I am a little bit lost. I think I need some clarification about what the angle is to understand it.
Yeah, I'm a bit lost.
I mean,
Well,
I know
maybe somebody out there's going to make a comment and tell us,
perhaps, yeah. I mean, if it's coming from an angle of demand avoidance being avoiding the unreasonable demands of society and other people, as in managing your workload kind of thing, then I can relate to the idea about having to say no to yourself as much as you have to say no to the demands of other people. If someone says, can you do this for me? And you haven't got time, it can be hard to say, actually, no, I can't, I haven't got time, and apologize. You feel like you're letting somebody down. But often a lot of the demands on ourselves are things that come from inside, things that we feel that we ought to do, things that we should do, not always things that we want to do. And it can be just as hard to say no to those internal demands as it is to the external demands. I don't know if that makes any more sense.
Could it be anything to do with not turning them into external demands by not announcing grandiose or reckless, or even unnecessary to announce at all, plans for ourselves when we could keep a thing private before we do it? And this is familiar to me sometimes. That's in case I can't do things, and that might not be the same for everyone. But I know someone else might think they're going to do something embarrassingly, just want to do it without scrutiny, so they can make the most fulfilling choices. Where do these demands on yourself? I go down a rabbit hole with them.
Well, I think it's fairly clear there's a couple of different ways people can read the post. It's not something that I personally have a current issue with. But yeah, putting your thoughts out there on social media can take some guts. It takes nerve to be really open, as Jordan is. So yeah, thank you for sharing it with everyone. It's got it's got a couple of reactions. I think it clearly does speak to people.
Yeah, and Jordan's somebody that we follow for good reason because of the different posts that we've seen over the time. I'm wondering, there is an error on your recording, Liz. I'm wondering if you wanted to reset by going out and in again, and you could then take up where you left off.
Yeah, okay, I will I will show myself out, show myself
Okay.
back in.
We're just going to leave dead air. That was dead air, and that solved the problem for you, Liz.
Okay, it still says recording error on my phone, but
Oh, it's gone to that on mine as well. Okay, what we'll do is we'll get your voice from somewhere else. Don't worry, we'll just carry on as we are.
okay, it'll be a very interesting edit if if I'm not in it at all and I'm the one reading stuff out, won't it?
No, there's a backup copy.
Okay, good. Yeah, I was just looking at Jordan's original post, and I mean, there's 333 reactions to it and a whole load of comments, so it's clearly it has struck a tone with a lot of people. So the next post that we shared is from Pete Warmby, autistic author, and he's sharing a few takes on what autism can be like. Any of these relatable for you? There are a few, but I'll read them out. Autism is a bit like sitting in a chair in an unusual pose that no human has ever found comfortable and finding it very comfortable indeed. Autism is like missing a train because there were no empty double seats, and quite simply, you would rather lose your job than sit right next to someone. Autism is like viewing the landline in your house with a vague sense of disquiet, as if it's a dragon that could awake at any point and spoil your day. Autism is like getting way too invested and animated for a moment after one of your favourite subjects is briefly mentioned in a pub conversation, so you spend the rest of the night feeling vaguely ashamed. Autism is like pre-planning conversations in your head beforehand and being irritated considerably when they don't go as you expected, in the same way a director of a film might be if an actor fluffs their lines. Autism is like feeling every stitch and label in your clothing at all times, times 10 in summer, yet having no idea whether you should do anything about it. Autism is like wearing the same item of clothing every day, simply because finding a different one would disrupt your morning routine and might well lead to the destruction of the sun. Autism is like knowing so much about something that you can ever actually use that knowledge in front of people, as you'll fear it'll make you look really weird, and to be honest, it probably would. Autism is like analysing every emotion you feel to try to work out what it means or how to beat it, like viewing grief or jealousy as an end-of-level boss fight. Autism is like trying to walk off a broken arm because the alternative is going to the hospital and you don't want to be a hassle for anyone. Autism is like having a panic room inside your head you can retreat to at any time, and it's filled with comics, video games, books, and music, so you end up spending more time in there than you spend in the world. Autism is like oversharing wildly with a figure in authority because, well, they did ask. Autism is like having this strange ceremony after every social occasion whereby you solemnly and carefully analyse everything you did in the fear you may have unknowingly made a right fool of yourself or upset someone without realising. And then the final panel is just promoting his book Untypical, which I haven't read but is on my reading list, and it's the #1 bestseller in neurology on Amazon. So there we are. Anyone relate to Pete's little vignettes, I should call them, of what autism is like?
I think we can all pick and choose the ones that we relate to more and less. It's lovely, you know. People should go and have a look at this post. They should go to Pete Warmby's site and put that book on the reading list. Pete definitely speaks to a wide section of people across us all, and somebody definitely to put on your reading list. If you want another conversation about some of the things on the list, I forgiven myself so many of the things on those panels. Either I've decided to allow them to happen without any, unmask and just let them happen, or I've got different ways of dealing with them. And there's so much that maybe you didn't recognise that you did as a compensation before you knew about your own autistic identity, that's kind of built up in your armoury, and so many of these things you kind of, I do actually feel like that, but I've managed to not have it figuring so much in my identity anymore. And why am I saying that? I think what I'm saying is that there's this horrible feeling sometimes that people who are autistic feel as though they're stuck and fixed in everything in their identity and in their abilities. But my experience of actual autistic people generally out there, they are the people who are willing to find ways round things, make things work, make an adaptation work for themselves, and there's a real positive version of autism that people can experience. Yeah, Pete's a good person to read to look at this stuff. I just hope people will use the knowledge to improve their own life.
Also, a lot of the self-scrutinizing ones are about, aren't they, finding ways through. This has been through and round now. Perhaps you get more detached use to things, perspective for it to become way round instead of way through. This is perhaps more the situation of some of these items. By the way, the destruction of the sun one, that's how it sounds more like OCD, but there are spectrum co-occurring, with repeat habits and stims that can convert in Mozart. But there's a book, it's going back to 2000, so very, I think probably before some all-out understanding it. Quite convergent. Amy Walensky, Passing for Normal, of Tourette's and OCD memoir. She's a journalist in Northeast US. And yeah, she talks about being on a metro train and having this irrational feeling that she'd be responsible for crashing it unless she does something that she rationally knows is silly to have to do. This sounds like this similar feeling.
The next post on the feed is us posting that we are currently live, which we are, so that's very meta. And the post after that is from Autistic and Living the Dream. We share quite a lot from them. They post some really good, really kind of insightful and incisive posts. This is something that they have shared. It's a piece of writing attributed to Nedra Tawwab. I probably pronounced that wrong, so apologies. It says, "Love is not all you need. You need mutual respect. You need support. You need trust. You need boundaries. You need people to be there when it matters. You need space to grow and acceptance when you do. You need people to show their love in a way you can understand.
How is trust human? Life's never been mine. I've never found you can trust people. I'm not sure that means they don't trust me either. I've got adjusting things. Sometimes we feel we are limited in our own abilities to adapt and change according to situations and circumstances.
Yeah, I'm glad you read that, Morris, from Justin Spelling today, because it spans both the last post and this post, doesn't it? It's this internal feeling of limitation that either comes from ourselves or has been added to us during our life, that can come from various labels, various expectations or non-expectations of us, that when we're introspective, we if we notice it, maybe we can use it as something that is a key to us releasing ourselves from that. You know, just realization that that might have been happening might actually just turn things around for us. It's almost like giving yourself permission.
And you need to be people to be there when it matters. As more often, more people aren't than are. So there's something you searches endlessly for as a heart of gold.
I mean, this might sound cheesy, probably is. Probably a meme I saw, or a frilly, you know, those kind of frilly frames that you get with a few pithy words in them that, you know, live, laugh, love, whatever. And it said that love is a verb, and that's all it said. You know, just reminding us that to love somebody, love to give love, to love a child, love a person, love anything, is something you do as an action, as a verb. It isn't a state. You know, being in love is something entirely different. To love is a verb. It's something you do, and you demonstrate, and you make happen. And all the things in that list are how you make love happen.
I think
So
the compilers. Sorry.
They're the end of the rainbow you never quite reach, then.
No. No, I don't think it is. I think you can be in a state of loving somebody for a period of time, and that is of itself important. I think you can talk about the rainbow idea that people might have a very, very long-term loving relationship that suits both people for a huge amount of time, but that doesn't have to be that. I think I tend to look at life in proportions of cakes. If it's 60% happy going on at the moment and 40% not so happy going on in any part of my life, I'm on the right side of things, and that's a good deal. And I think that that can be extended into your relationships and who you love. It's never an equality thing. It's always a swapping of things, and it's a verb.
I think all of the things on this list are aspects of different kinds of love, because not all love comes with support, and not all love comes with space. Sometimes love comes with smothering and stifling. That doesn't mean it's not love. Maybe more for one person than the other if this is a love between two people. I think those are all aspects of love, and to some extent expressions of love languages, because people express their love differently. I know the last point is you need people to show their love in a way you can understand, but that's not always possible. People will show their love in the way they are able to express it, and I think there needs to be a bit more awareness of that might not always look like the way you expect it to be. I think that's something that's really relevant to autistic people, because we often don't we tend to shy away from the kind of here's some things which are going to die and some things that might give you diabetes, forms of expression of love like roses and chocolates, and more to the kind of I saw this thing when I was not thinking of you and it made me think of you, so I brought it home and here it is. Like, that kind of love language is there's nothing wrong with that, that's just a different way of expressing love, but that can then be rejected by people because it doesn't look like the way they understand love to be. And yeah, of all the things on the list, I just think the last one, um if the last one wasn't on the list, I'd be like, yeah, these are all great, but the last one I think is a little bit exclusive, and risks people. I just don't think it's particularly fair, the last one. Actually, it's not very inclusive, it's not very equal. um it's putting a lot of burden on somebody to feel like they have to show their love in a way that they don't feel authentic in expressing it, but that the other person recognizes it as authentic, so they almost have to be inauthentic in their expression of love for it to be accepted. And that I find a bit I don't like that bit.
I hadn't seen that in it, but I do now. You've brought my attention to that, and it does feel as though it is slightly, yeah. It's because it is putting the onus on somebody else to display love to you so that you can understand it. It's making it them responsible for their way of communicating. And I would have thought love was much more about reaching out to find out where that person is. It's always crossing the boundary. It's always doing something more. Love is a kind of win-win situation. You do more than is expected for the person, then you receive more than is expected back, and then you end up in this virtuous cycle. When you're building well in a relationship, obviously sometimes you go down snakes as well, so you're not always up on ladders, and it's not always the right relationship for you at the right position for you in your life. So it's a very complex thing, having a relationship and the rest of life. But yeah, I see what you're saying though.
And I don't mean that as sort of like, and therefore the whole thing's irrelevant, or and it's the end of the world. I mean, the way you get around that issue is by having a conversation and being understanding and looking at it from other people's points of view, because the way that children show their love is quite often really sticky and involves painting. finger finger painting and lots of hugs and like to me that's really horrible, and I don't, that's not a way that I would understand love. I can understand that that's the way that, you know, typical kids tend to be, you know, expressive. um so it's about understanding each side of it. Just initially that made me think, ooh. The next post is from Effie Purple Bean Autistic Artist. They are an autistic artist, multiple brain surgery survivor, professional illustrator, author, and doodle meme creator. And they've shared a picture which I am not even going to try and do the injustice of doing a visual description of it, because I can't. All I can say is that it reminds me of the Green Man illustrations that you find in sort of pagan culture. So the text accompanying the image says, "This is from my Sharpie summer series. I had been relearning to draw with my non-dominant hand after a year and a half by this point, and saw it as a turning point for my art. Pattern art is rad. All the love and light from my strawberries, mushrooms, flowers, and leaves."
It's a lovely image, and yeah, the Green Man or the woodland goddess kind of idea, because the image is made up of leaves and acorn cups and different mushrooms and flowers and garlands. So the other thing that it reminds me of, not just the greenwoods, is batik. Like, it has a kind of colour pattern that goes with batik, and the shapes look as though something that would work very well in that art form.
It's kind of difficult to discuss a picture on the radio. I think that's the main thing I've taken from this.
Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah. It's just
Well
Yeah,
it's a
done,
nice image, though, isn't it?
well done for the skill readapting. I mean, to do that with a not original hand, change of hand, and very detailed.
do you know, I'd
Absorbing
almost
picture.
completely missed the fact that it was the non-dom. I know I read it out, but that, when I'm reading out loud, I'm not always consciously processing internally what I'm saying, and I sort of completely missed that. I said I don't think I could draw that with my dominant hand. So um, learning to redraw with a non-dominant hand is an incredible feat of brain wiring.
Yeah, it rather puts the myth to the inflexibility of autistic brains, doesn't it? If somebody can, I mean, there's the orthodoxy that different hemispheres of the brain work with different sides of the body, with dominant and non-dominant hands. You know, it's a brain wiring thing. It's got, and here we've got an autistic person doing it, and to such a level, and doesn't seem it took a particularly long time either. There's got to be something about our wiring that makes that work, hasn't there?
Well, everyone has neuroplasticity. You know, everyone's brain is adaptable and changeable in some ways. I don't think that's a particular feature of autistic brains. Um, in fact, it could even be harder with an autistic brain because of fewer episodes of synaptic pruning, meaning there are potentially more pathways for the brain to wire along that are not the ones we intend. So it may actually be harder for us to rewire certain
I would
functions.
argue the converse from that. I would argue that our lack of pruning makes it easier for us to mould our brains, or for our brains to be moulded. I wonder which is true.
Yeah, we'll have to get a neuroscientist on to settle that one, I think.
Yeah.
It's like the lightning strike. Has got to find the direct path through all the potential paths when it emerges.
Moving on to the next post, shared from Jordan's Autistic Journey. It's a personal blog, and this is written. The content's created and written by the parent. The description is: "My son is 4 years old and has autism. This is our journey together." And the text is on a background of kind of sunsetty type of clouds, that blue and slightly pinky orange colour. Never underestimate the parent of a child who has special needs. They may appear exhausted and at times overwhelmed. However, they are more than capable, creative, and extremely resilient. They persevere even in the most challenging situations. These parents truly deserve respect and not judgment, assistance and not attitude, smiles and not sneers.
Can never use the expression itself as a sneer. Certain commentators seem to sound continuously sustaining a humorous pattern, as well as worldly wise, are wont to do. As good stories going on. That plasticity, parent on spectrum themselves, same question of more or less plasticity to have more or less resilience with. They do. But they make up for it with empathy, of course. So they always make a good story model.
The thing I forget a lot of the time is how theoretical examination of brain structures and how the brain works for the whole population, never mind autistic population or other variants of brain structure. It is we see so much of this stuff that we forget how theoretical it is. Or I do, anyway.
There's a really good course. It's from the University of Chicago, and you can access it for free on Coursera. And it's called Neurobiology. No, it's called Understanding the Brain: The Neurobiology of Everyday Life. And it's a 10 weeks worth of course, part time. It's it's kind of pitched at being beginner level. You might benefit from having done like sort of GCSE chemistry or biology to begin with, because it's really like it's not particularly a lay course. I didn't think so anyway. It was very understandable, but you needed to have an understanding or awareness of a bit of the brain to begin with. But that's a really good course to do to understand a bit more about what we know about the brain, how we know about it, why we know about it. And there's a book called The Story of the Brain in 10.5 Cells, which is, it's just a little starter into the hundreds of thousands of different types of brain cells. But it gives a really good insight into how we know what certain brain cells do and how we prove that and how we disprove other theories. So yeah, it's not at all theoretical. There's a lot of stuff we still don't know, but we know a hell of a lot about the way the brain works. It's just there's just a lot to know. Like no one person can possibly know everything about the human brain. There's just too much. There's too much to know.
I think the thing I'm happy about is that my autistic identity is at least partly developed from my physical brain type, and other people have a similar brain type to myself that fire up in the same way when you put them under various tests and scanners. What Justin says is that our autistic brains are wired differently from neurotypical brains, and in essence that's really a perfectly acceptable thing for us all to just accept, isn't it? It's enough. A lot of it is conjecture, but just that one concept is enough to be dealing with at the moment. And Justin points out that Inside Our Autistic Minds by Chris Packham was a good explanation of it.
Of the outward reality and consequence, rather than the inside micro details, and not always fully traced yet, I expect.
The next post is us posting the edit of the conversation we had on Sunday, the 28th of April, where we talked about various posts, various topics. You can go and listen to the edit there, 57 minutes. I actually edited that one. Could possibly have made it shorter, I think, but we'll see. We had some interesting conversations nonetheless. The post after that is from Autistic Revolution. They are a magazine. They are currently, I think, compiling issue number 3. We've had them on the channel before. We did a recording with Autistic Revolution ahead of their launch issue, I believe. So I will read out the post. Had a conversation recently with a neurodivergent person I super respect personally and professionally about my imposter syndrome, being on LinkedIn and not having any letters after my name. Thank you for the inspiration for this post. LinkedIn loves folks with letters after their name. For some, the letters really matter. I totally get it, and I'm definitely not disregarding what an achievement it is to get the letters. I also know folks with the letters that I adore and are the most incredible humans with or without the letters. But for some, getting the letters is impossible. Lack of financial opportunity, lack of neurodivergent affirming spaces, lack of privilege. Recently, I had a separate conversation with a neurotypical person about their interest in submitting an article for our digital publication. Quote unquote, I have worked with autism for many years. I have a PhD in autism and mental health. Then in brackets, respectful eye roll. They had so many letters and a massive following, mainly from other lettered folk. My response. So, Autistic Revolution educates humanity by publishing facts and lived experiences of being autistic by autistic folk, and we occasionally publish works from autistic allies who follow the neurodiversity paradigm, which they didn't. Unfortunately, they were astounded and very upset with me when their article wasn't published with our digital publication. But the thing is, that one statement, worked with autism, etc., isn't a statement we should be advocating for in 2024. It is an example of the letters being part of the many barriers autistic and otherwise neurodivergent folk face and probably influence this person's principles, beliefs, and mindset on the autistic lived experiences. So you see, it's not the letters that should hold value or more value over someone who doesn't have the letters. It's the person, their personal values and principles, mindset, and beliefs, their lived experience. There is an assumption which exists within our society and professional platforms that the letters equate to value, that lived experience is seen as less valuable. But the ironic thing is, the people with the letters get to walk through the doors and stand on the platforms, get to rub shoulders with the other letters and pat each other's backs, while taking all the good stuff, the knowledge and the praise from the folk without the letters, and making oodles of money. So, lettered folk, please use your privilege wisely. Open those doors, make space on the stage, the platform, and in other important places where decisions are made and conversations are held. Share the opportunities and turn to the non-lettered folk for the knowledge and make sure to credit them for it. Value shouldn't be measured through the lens of the letters. Side note, to my lettered allies and fellow humans, let's work together. To our neurodivergent lettered neurokin, I know what it cost to get those letters. May the 4th be with you. Jenny Loughran.
The letters are a badge of fitting what the game wants. I mean, the kind of currency, aren't they, that you surf sail with, and so I just understand that they use them when they've got them. But yeah, doesn't letters over lived experience run through every issue? and this configuration of society.
I support what is basically a manifesto there. It is a revolutionary call there from Jenny, and I respect everything that she's saying there. I think there is a change, and I think it has changed, and there are some undercurrents throughout the established autism world that are bringing people who are neurodivergent into more places, and because those cracks have already happened, there are those neurodivergent people in the right places that are then inviting and the correct kind of skilled people to sort of join from the inside, and it's kind of an accelerating thing that that Jenny is keeping our eyes on the prize there, and we're all doing it in different ways. From my point of view, I like to bring in people with extremely opposed views to myself here on Autistic Radio, and I like to listen to them so that they get a sense of me as a colleague rather than an opposition person. And if all I do is create the feeling within some autism professionals out there that when they come onto Autistic Radio that they've spoken to somebody eye to eye who does not feel subservient in any way, who speaks with lived experience and meets them where they are, I think that is advocating one version of autism that is helpful. Autistic Revolution do it in a different way. Everybody has to choose their own best way of overturning things and creating the revolution in autism.
Never hurts to speak to the ears who hear.
The next post is from NeuroWild. They are a autistic and ADHD speech pathologist, live in Australia. They're an illustrator, advocate, and mum to 3 neurodivergent kiddos. And this is some of their artwork is just gorgeous. It's a single panel. There's a small child playing, blowing bubbles or chasing bubbles, and then there's 2, I'm going to assume teachers or teaching assistants standing next to each other, because one's holding a clipboard, and a clipboard to me says authority. And the two adults are saying, "So Jack just got an autism diagnosis. We should keep an eye on his social skills." And the other adult replies, "Gladly, he has the most beautiful autistic social skills." the text that accompanies the image, so the caption, keep an eye on, watch, enjoy, marvel at, appreciate, celebrate. When I see autistic kids hanging out and online counts, info dumping, stimming, and sharing their deep interests, unmasked, authentic joy, it makes me forget about the bad stuff for a while. So yeah, I'll keep an eye on their social skills. I'm happy to. M.
What a lovely expression. That's really life affirming that somebody sees their child in that manner, and the more non-autistic parents can get that feeling from their experience of having an autistic child, the better. Being able to see their child as somebody that has their own way, and fully accept that way is perfectly good. It does mean that you do have to look at the rest of society and see that you're being judged differently, and your assertion of those facts, that your child has every right to be the person that they are, your assertion of that will come in against some opposition from some people. You know, sometimes religious leaders or political leaders or doctors or people with an opinion out there, the health visitor or the somebody. But you have to stand up against that. And the more people that can be down that path, the better.
Showing there are contexts where these things pay off well. If we can all make contexts we thrive in share interests, you have context where folks actually take an interest. That is progress on the default denominator of most cultures historically. Built from state and nature to civilization in Locke terms for the political philosophy, dating back centuries before we knew of autism.
Wow. Incredible, Morris. Incredible. I think just simply taking the first thing, the thing about context and seeing your child in their best context and going there with them, really experiencing where they want to be and then being fulfilled in that context should be the most uplifting thing of a parent, and that might be the way to access your child's world better. I think that's what Morris is saying there as well. But there was another thing about context, and it comes from advice I was given really by my own autistic parents, and that they would be regularly explaining that some things, speaking in certain ways or making certain jokes or certain behaviours in different contexts, that there were kind of different rules, different games, different things you had to do out there, and they would point them out as though, you know, it was just a way of getting through life. You understood that these were shortcuts for you, and that's also what you need to pass on to your child is things that you know that they might not realise, and actively give them context to their own behaviours without changing those behaviours to the context.
This made me kind of hark back to that post, and I'm afraid my cognitive function has decided to turn itself off. It's gone into safe mode for the evening, so I can't remember who posted it, but it was the one about love and the way love is, and the fact that autistic people might have different love languages, and it just reminded me of that, because we have different methods of socializing, different ways of expressing our interest in other people, that don't look like the ways that other people understand socializing to be. So if I'm giving someone basically a free lecture, that's me going, I think you're interesting, and I think you might be interested in this interesting stuff because I find it interesting. And so that's me socializing. Like, the way I flirt is by giving people books and saying, read this. Like, that's not, I mean, I know enough about it to know that that's not the way anyone else does it.
Intellectual matching.
Pretty much, yeah.
First find somebody who's really into the things you're into, and we'll deal with the rest of it afterwards.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah. It's maybe a bit like that.
Why not? Any strategy, you know. There was a fellow that came over. I'm sorry, I was going to go into an anecdote. I apologise.
No, you're absolutely right though, because it's if it works, then it's probably a good thing that it's worked, and if it doesn't, it's probably a good thing it didn't work.
Yeah. I'm reminded of a fellow I met from Estonia who was volunteering for us. He was on the odd side of life. I wouldn't call him out as neurodivergent, but he was eccentric. He was a science teacher, STEM, and his idea was that he would learn the 2,000 most commonly used English words in the infinitive, with no text, no tenses at all, just nouns and verbs, and then he would go to volunteer on a project where we had a concentration on language, and just pick up the language, and it worked. His strange version of how he was going to teach himself a different language meant that he was immediately making sentences that people understood and making himself, and we were having quite in-depth conversations. And I said to him, it's Brownian motion, relationships. You have to have enough encounters with possible matches, like gases trying to meet each other and combine. It's numbers game, because you're an odd man, but there are super odd people out there that are right for you, but you have to meet enough people to find them.
I never used to find them in pre-diagnosis life, obviously. It's not can't just be quantity, it's got to be those looking in the wrong places, not knowing where the right places are, not having access to them maybe.
Well, shared interests, isn't it? I think most of the people I know who are both divergent and are couples, neurodivergent or whatever we call ourselves nowadays, they met at something like a reenactment group or a chess group or in a scientific university. So they kind of, met up at in a place where there was a reasonable throughput of reasonably out neurodivergent people. It's a bit like if you're gay, finding enough gay friends.
That sort of leads us quite nicely into the next post, which is from Emergent Divergence, the Neurodivergent Ramblings of David Gray Hammond. I think we've shared stuff from David before. He's an author, writer, advocate, mentor, trainer, and professional nuisance. What a great description. And this is text on a background. The background's kind of green into the blue, color spectrum with a handprint. And it says, "We didn't choose to be neurodivergent. We were born this way. When you treat us poorly for the circumstances of our birth, when you try and portray us as outsiders, you demonstrate your own ignorance, not our lack of worth."
It's a manifesto week, isn't it? There are people putting out their campaign messages. Good on them. Good on Mr. David Gray Hammond. Good on Loughran. Good. Let's have these people speaking like this, and let's get something done with this energy.
I personally don't mind people portraying me as an outsider if they're doing it because I'm different to them, because I'd rather be separate than included in a group of people who are bigoted. I would say maybe that's just me. I don't think it's just me. I think quite a lot of people would quite happily welcome that kind of exclusion if it means, was that Winston Churchill quote? "I don't want to be part of a club that anyone that would have me as a member." No, that's not it. That's not what I mean to say.
Well, that's not Winston Churchill either.
Okay. Oh, I'm trying to talk when my brain's turned itself off.
Oscar Wilde, that one.
It's not even the sentiment I was trying to get to. I'm trying to make sense, and my brain's in safe mode. Yeah, I don't think I've got a point.
I think it's something about being quite comfortable, keeping your integrity on the outside rather than jeopardizing your sense of self by reneging on your own integrity, joining in certain groups that have certain behaviours and certain ways of being. I think we do have a sense of our own code that we're really, really uncomfortable compromising, and when we do compromise it damages us, and that's what part of the psychological damage of masking and stuff is about.
Well, enslavement to the stand-in way, the fashion, the not self-presenting, but the what school tries to teach you, the presenting the same way as all the folks who will ridicule anything else. Then.
Yeah, I think society works by trying to get as many people as it can to follow rigid codes, rigid ways of being, career paths, the way that we run our businesses and our organisations in hierarchies and strategies of that nation. I don't think that's really healthy. You know, this is the thing that changed in autistic people's lives as the Industrial Revolution got going. Previously, we had control over our lives because we were small cottage industries and we would sell our goods at local markets. Post-Industrial Revolution, those people lost their right to be on those lands. They got herded into the cities and then were living a much more contained lifestyle within the machine. And we are really still there. The way we organise ourselves is not suitable for us as autistic people because we don't have enough autonomy within the system. So we are always portrayed as outsiders. We're always pushed to the brinks, to the outsides of things. I do think there's a change in understanding coming that's of very positive benefit to people who are autistic or neurodivergent, with all of the other different labels people are given. But it's something we are going to have to really work on ourselves. There are movements going forward. By recognising how difficult it has been in the past, gives us the power to be able to change things going forward. And it's possible now to reverse what happened to us when we industrialised and we no longer had the autonomy that we would have had as neurodivergent people living a more natural life.
Knowledge is power, potentially. And Justin raises the post-industrial revolution. Is that what we're thinking? The industrial and the post-industrial.
The next post is from Harry's blog, Inspired Mind. So even though he's not here, we're still hearing from Harry today. The telephone call. One thing that frustrates me is that the easy communication of I'll start again. The telephone call. One thing that frustrates me is that the easy communication tool of a telephone can in many ways be a difficult task. Aside from family and friends, the phone call can seem such a frustration, especially for contacting places like agencies and commercial entities. Scripting can help, but then over-preparation can lead to some anxiety. Thank goodness for texting and emails. Harry.
And this is said by a man who also would normally be doing what you're doing, introducing the post, speaking, and also interrogating and speaking to autism professionals in our other work with Autistic Radio. And we still feel the same thing about these telephone calls. I still feel the same thing about telephone calls, and it's been a big part of my life and business, making myself work and make various telephone calls. I think he's right about texting, and I also think the chat function on various websites can give me the opportunity to take part in live chat rather than on a telephone call. The one thing I think people should be absolutely aware of, though, is when you type into that box on live chat, they can see you as you're typing. You can't see them as they're typing to you, but before you press send, everything you write. So if you start off, I think it's funny to start off writing insulting things to get it off your chest and then put a nicer thing and then press send. The person on the other end has seen the other thing you wrote first.
Phoning's harder for me when it's social and when it's a specific message, although the follow-up to a message is then not so hard. It's the same as I can prepare, rehearse in mind both a thing needing said on the phone at a life businessy level. I need to prepare it before I can possibly make the call, and something if it's being said in an meeting like the cross party, a big meeting, the mental composition first. So similar, and it's of course outside the box of conversational flow. They're using a different strategy than is the setting's norm.
Yeah, I think that pre-preparing thing, getting ready, knowing that you've got this phone call to make, and then doing all the pre-preparing and then making the phone call, it's a hard one. It used to be that when I used to come on to talk on Autistic Radio on our regular Sunday slot, that the whole of my day was getting prepared to be able to make sure that my voice worked when I turned on the computer and put my microphone out there. And over the repeated times of doing that, Sunday after Sunday after Sunday, it's become almost stress-free, so that now I can maybe think a little bit about the broadcast, maybe involve myself something to do with the radio, and quite close to the time just open up the screens and get on with it. But it's taken a long time, and that's a repetition of it, and we don't get the opportunity to learn those telephone skills, all of us, and those repetitions, and take the fear out of it. So we never develop it, so it goes away, I think.
When we do this, we also know, like, there's a really clear context around what we're doing. We know that the people we're speaking to are also autistic, and therefore likely to either get it and have experienced it themselves, or not be judgmental, or more likely both. And when we have professionals on and we're doing a session with them, because our table is level, it's a round, even table, nobody is above or below anyone else, you don't feel you don't feel in any way inferior. Whereas when you're making a phone call to organise an appointment or get your car serviced, or whatever it happens to be, there's sometimes a dynamic where, as the customer, you are less knowledgeable and therefore have less authority than the person you're speaking to. Not always, but in some situations like that. And then you've got getting through the getting through past the GP receptionist they have some special skills. It's almost impossible to get past the GP's receptionist to get an appointment. So I think different phone calls to different places can have different types of anxiety attached to them. And when you've had a bad experience with one, that type of phone call can become really hard to approach again. And sometimes that can sort of bleed into other types of phone call becoming difficult as well. Um,
Yeah, very.
So it builds up. What do we do? How do we overcome this?
I think the most inclusive way to overcome this is to keep advocating for other forms of communication to be provided in parallel. So either text messaging or email or some kind of text-based service, because there are people that can't and don't speak. So for whom a phone call is not going to happen. People with hearing impairments who aren't able to use a telephone to listen. So there are so many people with some kind of challenge around communication that means the phone is just not a possibility for them, that we need to make more equality in communication. End communication discrimination. That's last year's Spellers and Allies campaign. It's still very relevant. So rather than forcing ourselves to be able to fit into the box of making a phone call, we need to keep pushing for other ways of contact to be made available.
Yeah, what you're saying there is incredibly important, and I don't think I was always aware how the systems do discriminate against the way people communicate. I think a lot of us had a kind of Blue Peter idea that it had all been a bit sorted. We saw this thing for deaf people and that thing and teletext, and we kind of thought, well, it's all been organised now. But it really isn't, is it? It really is a clear discrimination that is difficult for people. And the more we embrace that as part of what we do here, the better. And for me, it's a really important thing that needs bringing up again and again.
I think we've got time just for one last post from Autism on the Water, and they are announcing that the AOTW team are en route to Cowes, Isle of Wight, for our first open day of the year this Saturday. So that will be yesterday, our Southern Base Open Day. We have 2 yachts and 2 motorboats all ready to give over 75 people with autism and their families or carers magical trips from Cowes Yacht Haven around the Solent, and also taking in the atmosphere of the Cowes Spring Classics and Royal Southern Yacht Club Regatta. We look forward to welcoming our guests on board each boat, which will all be manned and run by a fantastic team of volunteers. And then they've tagged about 30 different pages, so I won't read them all out. But I hope everyone had a fab day yesterday, because the weather was actually nice down south. Well, it was here. I don't know about the Isle of Wight, but what a lovely thing to do. Getting out on the water is just so calming. just being around water is really calming.
I think the lovely thing about that organisation is they create an experience or a group of experience for some autistic young people mainly, and that one experience can change how they feel about so many other parts and so many other aspects of their life. It's the igniting thing that gives them a sense of self, a sense of achievement, a sense of everything. It and to be able to do that repetitively, one after another, as different ages, different people come through, I think that's a really good model that they have there, and it's so little amount of money per person, so it's a very efficient way of getting a good situation, a good result for young autistic people. Should we leave it there?
Yeah, I was just thinking it's got 2.5 minutes possibly left of the broadcast, and although the next post is also about the phone, I'm not sure we've got anything more to add on that, or it might just wind us up about phone calls. So, in the interests of a slightly more chilled Sunday evening, probably a good place to wrap it up. So this has been Spectrum Voices Conversations. We're here every Sunday, 6 p.m. UK time to 7:30 p.m. UK time, which is 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time to 2:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time in the States. So we will speak to you, see you all, hear you all, and be here for you all next week. Good night.
Good night.